Can you all hear me? Can you all see me? Okay, good. Yes, this is my Pecha Kucha on Psychovisual Cinema and Polytext, a new methodology for storytelling characterized by an engagement locus with an attached 5-minute film at the end. But what is psychovisual cinema? Well, it leverages known phenomena of human perception and consciousness to create a more engaging film experience. And something else that I've come up with is polytext, an invention of mine that represents everything to do with a particular work. And I would say that any text that you could possibly read, watch, or write is in itself a polytext. And as I say, it's composed of 4 textual layers that exist in a hierarchy, with metatext at the top, how you say a particular thing, main text below that, what you're actually reading, subtext that exists in both main text and metatext, lower in the hierarchy, and then finally deep text. For me, it starts with metatext. Metatext being the text about the text. All of the information that places this thing and that situates it in our world. So, who created it, or at what era was it created? What was the discourse surrounding it? So a good example is my YouTube page, where you can see all of these videos that have their own title, that have a certain amount of views attached to them, that are presented on this profile with a profile picture and a kind of visual aesthetic with a name. So then we go to the kind of next layer down. Pretty interesting example, main text. As I say, is what you read on the page. Usually, main text is the thing that endures. Your metatext may change, but as Shakespeare would show us, the Shakespearean language doesn't change, even if we might recreate a piece of Shakespeare and completely change the subtext, and the metatext would be completely different, and the deep text would be completely different. But then coming to subtext, it exists in pretty much all pieces of work. It is always there. Usually it's inexplicit, so these aren't things that you're saying directly, but you kind of mean them. A good example is A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, by the Iranian director Ani Lili Amirpour, who creates this fabulation of zombies and vampires, all of these such cultural phenomena which speak to real social practices and to a societal thing. Any element of main text almost always has a subtext. Here, in this film, the use of vampire imagery is a subtextual device that relates to the Iranian diaspora. And then finally we come to the deepest level, deep text, another kind of invention that I've made for this, where I want to have a thing that relates to a continuous motif that exists throughout the entirety of a work and that can be summed up in one sentence. An example for me would be whether the Empire in Star Wars, because it evokes so much Nazi imagery, is a direct kind of correlation. And the same with Harry Potter, of Voldemort being a kind of proto-Hitler. And that's basically the deep text of those. But then I also created Barbenheimer, a mashup of Barbie and Oppenheimer, released on the same day, with a total runtime of nearly 4 hours. And this is to show how the resulting deep text of both ends up merging. And the reason I've codified polytext is to create a work that demonstrates a polytextual shift because I think it'll be pretty interesting to play with those layers and figure out what happens to the work if you're making certain things act as other layers. So main text I've shifted to the top where meta text was. Subtext is now elevated. Deep text also elevated, and meta text has been buried down below in the deep darkness of meta text. So the film's main text, as I say, is elevated to meta text, where it now discusses its subtext within its main text and stages its deep text as an unchanging subtext, with the meta text of it being a film becoming the new deep text. In our project, we shot all the dialogue in reverse order to later reconstruct the conversation in the edit. This is to create the sense of déjà vu, showing adjacent frames twice. And another aspect of this is the dialogue, which becomes blatant and self-aware, yet purports a consistent subtext from deep text. It engages with, hopefully, the audience expectations within the hope of the film. So thank you for listening. We'll now watch the film, if you can. Get that forwarded.
Sometimes, hey, they don't tell the truth. Smiling faces tell lies, and I got proof.
Beware of the handshake that has this name.
I'm telling you.
Now it's like AR. So I'm just in the environment, and then I'm just sorry.
We both know I don't really have the time to get to know you, but I would prefer to not do this quick. It doesn't feel painful, does it?
Not yet, but you're working on it.
Sharp tongue. I suppose you're working on that, though. They can't get behind someone who's snarky for no good reason. Now let's see, this chair. You comfortable? It's ergonomic. Or at least that's what the supplier claimed.
If we're trying to sell chairs here, you must be worse at this than I thought.
Ah, see, that's the thing. It's not about the chair, Röan. It's about the environment. The setting. I've always believed you can tell a lot about someone by the environment they create or destroy.
And I'm guessing this sterile little box says more about you than me.
Touché. Speaking of, did you know this room used to have a ficus plant? quite a regal one too, but people kept forgetting to water it. That's when the vending machine came in.
So this is what you're doing, giving me your office history.
You're not the first to say that. And yet here we are. Listen, take this desk for example. Imported, walnut veneer. Lovely, isn't it? Even if I never actually use it.
It looks like plastic. If you don't use it, why keep it?
Why not? Some things exist just to exist, don't you think? Speaking of existence, the light fixtures used to hum, drive people crazy. Had to get them replaced with LEDs, quieter, efficient.
Efficient like this conversation, you mean?
You're not wrong. Efficiency rarely breeds understanding. But take these walls. Ever notice the textures? It's deliberate. They used to be smooth, but people complain. Something about being too perfect.
Walls don't talk. Neither should they distract.
Oh, they don't distract, Röan. They absorb everything. Like this conversation, for instance. Every word caught in their grain. Fascinating, isn't it?
If you're trying to fascinate, you're failing. Miserably.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. You're still here after all. Still listening. And speaking of listening, you heard that faint hum?
You mean that air thing? Hard to miss.
Hope you enjoyed. Does anyone have any questions about what the F just happened? Yeah. Come on.
I am a bit lost in the sense that I don't what was what. So could you sorry, I'm Turkey. Could you explain which part was which text?
Mm-hmm. So I think everything in the dialogue. If I did that film normally, would have been subtextual. So they would have said completely different things that meant what they were actually saying, what you heard them saying. So everything you heard was the subtext become main text. Yeah, exactly. Everything about making the film was buried as deep text. So all of the individual tricks about what was happening with the effects on screen, a very, very kind of very slight kind of shutter speed, drift. There was a moment where you could tell that Grecia was turning the page of a script. She was reading on the table in front of her rather than actually using this prop, kind of hidden. It's still a metatextual element, but pretending that is part of the deep text of the thing means it's a consistent presence throughout the film. That's basically what I was intending to do. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And to make it kind of work within the context of the thing is something that I'll be developing much more when I've got an actual budget. And, that's one of the only films that I think I'll ever make with a decent amount of CGI in it, because you can make points like that so much more clearly when you can do a lot kind of more spectacular things and have them in the background, or has kind of honest secrets, Yeah.
And what was the main text?
Main text, I think, metatext of me making a film, but then I guess you could say the main text of what they were actually saying is, I guess, the act of it being an edited sequence of this person going to an interview and sitting down. But of course, we've started the film like that and created that atmosphere. and then the dialogue completely subverts that. So I think that was another interesting thing that I discovered happens when you put those two into conflict. But thank you very much. Hope I answered your question.
Was there like a metasexual reason for why you decided to perform the Pecha Kucha in loads of different accents?
Yes. And I had a little word here. It was like Northern English, Australian, Scottish, regular accent, British English, Eastender, New Zealand, Toffee English, which is how I started it. Yes, there was very much a motive. I wanted to, one, disorient you in the way that Reggie Watts did in a performance for TEDx that he did once, where he starts off speaking in a kind of French-ish sounding language that doesn't exist, and then immediately within the span of one sentence switches to a very kind of English accent. But as well as disorienting you, I wanted to give a kind of a framework to the whole thing. Instead of it just being a Pecha Kucha, it's a Pecha Kucha with an underlying kind of change. So I hope that embodied what I was one of my main research aims with this as practice. So yeah.
Is the film like filmed like backward?
Yeah, so I said that it had to be like 5 minutes. That's the 5-minute cut. The whole film is going to be like 10 minutes. Is that what you were asking?
No, I wonder like what's the experience of like when it like filmed backward and then like when acting is not like consistent from like the start.
Oh yeah. Oh well, like the whole how difficult it was confusing. Yeah. So I wrote the script, and then I wrote versions for each actor, where I literally reordered all of their dialogue for them, and I said, okay, just go through, and they would end up reading all of their lines one after the other, so that I can cut between them. That was one way of doing it. Another way of doing it would be to do the entire sequence in reverse, but still have characters talking in turn. That's another way of doing it, potentially. Didn't actually do that for this one, but I'm definitely going to employ that same technique in the actual feature film. So yeah, it's all to play for. But I really wanted to test how noticeable doing that would be for the film. And I found that a lot of these decisions are very kind of subtle and very kind of subconsciously recognized, but they definitely are recognized. Everyone that I've spoken to about this film is like, oh yeah, I guess it's happening there, I see it, but I wouldn't have picked out it consciously had you not told me. So, yeah. Nice. Any more questions?
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Very well done, everyone. Thank you. We have a little break now, and then at 6:45, we're screening the films again. Okay. Yay.
Top work, soldier.
Thank you very much.